We have some time for questions, and I think there are some hands. Are there some hands up? Let me see if anyone would like to ask a question. Just visually put your hand up, or preferably raise your electronic hand, and then you may have the mic. Are there any questions from anyone? Yes, there are. Okay, Dion and then Patricia. Go ahead, Dion. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was really interesting. I took so many notes. No, it's just because of something that I'm dealing with right now. So I just wanted to ask you, in terms of your case study, if something like this came up, often with organizations, the allocation of resources cannot be equally distributed. We tend to have to distribute a lot of time, energy, effort, resources, physical even, or monetary, to where there's either a lot of money going through or a lot of risk that needs to be managed, right? So often people who are not in those divisions get very frustrated or very impatient if it takes too long, or if there aren't enough resources readily available for their division and department. So it becomes a kind of a frustration and a competition. And I was wondering if in any way, when that kind of conflict arises, did you find that the explanation of why this has to be this way, even if it's temporary, does that help, or does it not mitigate the conflict in any way? The conflict that you were speaking about in the second or third principle.
Yeah. So one of the things that when I am actually in the process, and I shared this with another group a couple of weeks ago, in the background, like in this application of Hume, it's about communication. It's a lot about early and often, and it's about explaining why things sort of work the way they work. And I can tell you, even in my role as a division chair, it's probably a 50-50 on how well that really works. So in that case study, the one locally here at the nonprofit, it worked. It worked because luckily it was a small group with not a lot of hierarchy. So flat organization of quote unquote management to employees. And that's what also made it easier all to see the same problem. And I think that's part of it. I mean, the flatter the group, the smaller the group, the easier it is to have these conversations. When you get into really large organizations, it's really difficult. I'm trying to think of the most recent example I've had here. I work in humanities. There's like zero money coming into the humanities. But, you look across the way, I'm in my office, I look across the way and there's the business division and they're cooking kids hot dogs and doing stuff. And I'm like, how did they get that much? I don't even know where they get this money. I can barely pay my adjuncts sometimes. And I will tell you, snark does not always work. I made a snarky comment to our president one time where we had this big display of faculty projects, and again, the business division almost had neon signs and things, and I just had some books. And she said, well, where's the rest of your stuff? I said, our stuff's free. It's ideas. We don't have to buy this stuff. And she didn't like that. She was looking for something. But what I do try to communicate is, if this does surface, to try to get some movement, is let's talk about, you mentioned risk. And I always go back, let's talk about your money relative to goals. Right? Because your budget isn't just set by paper costs this much, postage costs this much. I think people operate like that, and that's not it. Budget is set by what are your effective goals in this case, like academic year. What is it you want to accomplish? And let's set the goal of your budget based on that. Now, the hard part is if you're working with a for-profit, then that tells you if your budget is this much higher, you're going to have to bring in this much more revenue to cover it. If you think you're really going to do this, if you can't do it, we're going to have to go back and do the painful cutting exercise. In nonprofits, higher education, this is often the problem. How do you start recruiting more students or bringing in other revenue streams? But what I do try to get people to at least gravitate to it, if I can't completely nullify the conflict, is like, let's reorient towards goal setting relative to our budget. And then maybe we understand how time and resources work that way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I think we found the same, that when it's either interdivision or smaller, smaller parts of the organization or smaller outfits themselves, it's pretty easy because the message is quite broadly received, but
right.
Then with these big companies, and there's like a very little direct contact with upper management, middle management, lower management, and then employees and labor, obviously it's a much bigger number, then often what happens is they do not get that, your thing is not getting fixed today, because if I don't do this, think bad things are going to happen there. So I got to do that first. But when they get the why of it, it tends to help a little bit in terms of, that conflict of what you were speaking about. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would add, I think this is again why I think Hume works. There's a lot of things that groups can do without formal structures. That seems to be his early understanding of how humans cooperate. They didn't actually kill ourselves off for resources, we cooperated. But the bigger the structures get, the more difficult that becomes. And that's why when I work with senior leadership, and this was the conversation I had a couple of weeks ago, when I work with senior leadership, is you have to talk more, earlier. When you spring it on people, it doesn't matter how well reasoned it was, or even if it's the right thing. It's really, again, that matter of sort of managing the sentiment, I suppose, is a way to put it.
Thank you for your response to Dion. And I certainly would concur that the smaller and the flatter the organization is, the easier it is to implement the kinds of methodologies that you've developed. And I mean, the worst person in any kind of Socratic dialogue is the CEO, because they want to dictate the answers to everybody. They don't want to explore because they think they're supposed to know the answers. So that resonates with me, and Hume could really cut through a lot of this. This is really, really interesting. Just want to add that a lesson that I am learning still and implementing in not only our own organization but also more broadly with clients is you won't get far in humanities on our intrinsic or inherent value argument. I mean, we are so rich. I don't have to preach to the choir that we're so rich in inherent value, and yet we are being underfunded and marginalized and defunded and eliminated because of STEM. I think that the driver of a resuscitation of humanities and in general in any business is not inherent value but perceived value, and people will buy into something precisely because it's back to your whole point about self-interest, and not in a Hobbesian way, but in a constructive way. If people perceive value in humanities, then they will buy into it. Yeah. And so it's really up to us to, I think, be more open-minded ourselves and think about the consumer and the consumer's perspective. The argument of inherent value works for us, but it has to be an argument of perceived value to do better with marketing our own services. Yeah. So we have Patricia and Kane. Go ahead, please, Patricia. Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Lou. And really thank you to Jeremy for this really, really inspiring and enlightening presentation. I really enjoyed listening to you, and I learned quite a lot. And really, me too, as Lou said, I really appreciate the bridge between the lay and infidel Hume and the organization, and really I liked it. And also I will use some questions that you wrote down and some quotation. Of course, I will quote you, but I will use it in my job because I really appreciate those. And my question is regarding at the end of the work that you run, that you do inside the organization, does the organization ask you to, in a way, to prove the value that Lou was mentioning? I mean, I'm going back also to what Pepe Barrientos called the transformation effect of philosophy or philosophical counseling. Do they ask you at the end of your consultancy to prove in a quantitative way the effectiveness of your work? Or for example, you just run interviews, or you just test the satisfaction of your participants into the group? They improve, of course, the quality of their communication, as you said, and the quality of their being together. And of course, I'm sure that they had with you and your colleagues or collaborators precious moments to think about all the problems and the matters that guards them inside the organization. But I don't know if I've been clear regarding the evaluation of your job in terms of producing value for the organization, because that's what they want. Otherwise, it's one spot experience, and they said, okay, thanks to the humanities, and that's it. That's it.
I've had that experience as well. I will say the evaluative piece, and actually that is in part in the over COVID, really. I spent a lot of time going over what I've been doing, because that was often a challenge of, well, what's it mean for the bottom line, right? They just want to see that monetary metric.
Exactly.
And my concern with that metric only is, that's why I refer to it as the efficiency model. Well, I can tell you how much money I made or saved. I actually can't tell you how well the organization's performing. Like, you don't measure that either. You're only looking at, revenue streams and expenditures. But if you recalibrate what they're looking at in terms of time and energy, they're not even sure how they're measuring that. And so as of late, I've had a lot more conversations. This is where the my conversation with my acquaintance that works at a veterinary hospital, they are, again, post-COVID, going through employees. They're cycling through. They can't keep them. And this is what spurred that conversation. I said, well, tell me why you think that is. And as we went through this, here's the thing. They didn't hire me, which is fine. So it was all good. But as a conversation, it's what you're telling me is you have various understandings of how a process works and not an appreciated understanding. So we can all look at how hard a vet works. That doctor is doing surgery, saving lives, doing all this great work. That's hard stuff. We don't think about how hard it is at reception when there's a queue 4 dogs deep. They're answering the phones. They're trying to keep records straight. And then we don't account for the veterinary technician or others who cross both sides, who are doing both jobs and attending to maybe 3 I said, your issue isn't a money issue. Your issue is a time energy issue. So how do you want to evaluate that? And as I've been having those conversations, more people have kind of had aha moments of, and especially now, if your budgets are restricted, what else are you going to cut to get to the bottom line? You're going to have to think more creatively and differently about how are you managing your time and energy of yourself and employees? Because in one example, the veterinary example, the vet, one of the owners, and I'm not making this up, one owner on a Wednesday will do somewhere between 20 and 28 surgeries in 12 hours and just churns them through. And he can do it. That's great. But he's doing it because in his mind, if you're familiar with this language, he's got sort of a tack time of what it takes for him to make money for his company. That's great. But as he's making money for his company, are all of your employees really ready with the time and energy to work at that tack time? Because they're still just getting their wage.
Yeah.
Are they going to get a bonus for the additional 20 surgeries they've done? Right. So you have to think creatively about how do we keep feeding that. So when I have these evaluation questions, I push them to think differently about it. Sometimes they do get the proof at the end where this local nonprofit wanted me to come back and actually do a facilitation of some group conflict because they got a lot of answers. They saw the value and they knew they needed an external voice to help shape the conflict they were having around some of their other processes. And then the last sort of evaluation I had was very much anecdotal. When I worked with a financial institution, their wire department was in really bad shape. They had hired a new manager, and in 6 months, he was really frustrated because he couldn't figure out why his department didn't work. And I'm going to tell you what I did. I'm not even making this up. I spent an afternoon with him. I went in after lunch. I walked his process, talked to his people. And by 4:00, he says, so do you think you have any ideas? Like, oh yeah, I know what you need to do. He's like, what do you mean? And I kind of got a whiteboard paper, and just wrote out all these things. He said, I've been in this role for 6 months, pulling my hair out, can't figure out what to do. How can you come in here in 3 hours and do this? And I said, do you know anything about Aristotle's 4 causes? Like the why, what material, right? I just broke everything down to the efficient cause, the final cause, the formal. And when I rolled that, I was like, that is so clear. Why don't we all do this? I said, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I probably taught you that in philosophy class, but they get the value when they can see how to apply those tools.
Yeah, we don't all do this because they drop philosophy as a requirement in most universities. I mean, let's face it, they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Yeah. Jeremy, it's really incredible when you mention that kind of an anecdote. We have time for one more question before lunch, and that would be Kane. Please go for it, Kane. Unmute yourself.
Hey, Jeremy, you said something about, I want to get a clarification. You said Hume said that reason doesn't guide was it motivations or behavior?
So reason can inform, right? It can sort of, that's why I think utility and reasons are so closely related. I tell people it's sort of doing the data gathering, and it can kind of weigh out what we think is best, but it actually doesn't motivate any human behavior. It's part of.
But when you say it doesn't motivate human behavior, that's what I want to focus on the word doesn't. You say doesn't, you mean as a general rule for most human beings, or doesn't mean that it could, with certain human beings into certain levels or degrees, that it would be exceptional, but that it could exist?
So good question. I think for Hume, to be fair, I think it's a matter of it could, it just likely doesn't.
Okay.
And I say that because he does something similar in the second inquiry when he talks about what he calls the public or general goodwill, is that somehow that replaced sympathy and utility. Like it's how we should all just get along. And yet he does say that it's still got that scarce resource like the natural virtues, that I can feel for some people and do things just of my own accord, my own nature. I'm predisposed to it.
Right.
But he says it varies. Some people have a tremendous amount of public goodwill and do all kinds of things for all sorts of different people. And some of us have a smaller scale of this. I think for Hume, if we were going to be fair about how we think through reason, it's sort of the same way. The reason I say it doesn't, in kind of going to an intro to philosophy example, let's roll out all the studies and images of how horrible smoking and vaping is for you. And you're still going to get the guy going, yeah, that's horrible. I should quit someday. They get this information, but the sentiment, the passion, something else makes the decision.
Right.
I suppose if Hume were really, I mean, on the one hand, I think Hume is brilliant. I think he's so forward thinking, but he's also so far behind the curve in terms of neuropsychology and other things that I suppose if he were just a little bit more with it, he might say something about, even going to the last presentation, something about self-awareness and really recognizing, does this thing actually make me happy the way that I think it makes me happy? And then maybe reason could do something. But I don't think that fit Hume. And part of why it didn't fit Hume is I even think his concept of reason and what he was concerned a bit with was very Platonic, very Aristotelian, that you reason it out and there is only one way. And I don't think humans are.
I like that you gave that quote of what Hume said, but he didn't actually say it. But it seems like there's a lot of those when it comes to Hume. My favorite one is on Hume's Discourse on Miracles, where he says, belief in miracles is so and utterly unbelievable that paradoxically, that means that there must be at least one miracle, which is that people actually believe in miracles.
Right. I cover that in class. I think it's a brilliant.
Remember that?
Yeah, it's very much I tell my students, I think you should read that like tongue in cheek.
Right.
Not that the miracle is one of faith. It's a miracle.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you both. Jeremy, don't tell your veterinarian friends this, but, when the web developers get hold of this problem, they're going to build an app, and people will be checking their dogs in remotely, just like we check in for medical appointments now, and that's going to be their solution. You're going to check your dog in with an app.
I can confirm that they already did that. And the problem is they've already had to shut down the queue as early as 10 o'clock in the morning. They get so backed up. So what it did, right, in process improvement, it just pushed the bottleneck from inside to outside.
Sure, because no one knows how to use the app. And certainly they're not going to send the dogs off to get trained to use the app, not anytime soon. But listen, we're all hostages to the web developers, including at this meeting. On that happy note, I'd like to switch the view to full so we could all give you a round of applause for a tremendous talk. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And welcome to our friends from the West Coast who are just joining, and from India, Vala, I know you're in Jamaica, but you're still Indian, and Raja from India, and our friends from the West Coast. I see Regina, I know Barbara's here, Jessica's here. Thank you so much for joining. And we're going to break for lunch, okay, or whatever meal it is in your time zone. But we're in New York here, so we will take a 1 hour and 2 minute break. It's 11:58 a.m. in New York. So please reconvene with us in 1 hour's time. We have had 2 great presentations this morning. We have 4 more great presentations to come. So we're only getting started. And after lunch, we're going to welcome Simon, who's going to solve the problem of being disembodied and get us back into our bodies, and then a lot more good stuff happening. So I wish you all bon appetit, and we'll see you all in 1 hour's time, okay? Thank you so much. See you soon.